I need somewhere to put my anvil and vise. In case you're wondering about building green like I did by simply cutting down a tree and turning it into this, there are definitely some drawbacks. You have to pre-drill everything, and as it shrinks, there is a strong possibility of cracking. That's one of the reasons that these are such thick cuts. These are 3 inches thick. You should also avoid corners and edges when you can. The other problem is that I really should have used grain cuts when the grain was going this direction rather than up and down and then perpendicular. Although the perpendicular will be strong, this vertical up and down grain will not. This is an easy mistake to make with any kind of wood. In general, working with wet wood like this is about the same as working with pressure treated wood. And I would recommend most of the same practices. You absolutely have to pre-drill or you'll get severe cracking. It may not happen in a year or even 2 years, but it will happen. Even with fasteners that don't claim to require pre-drilling, it's always a good idea to pre-drill. The other thing is that you can build with nails using wet wood that hasn't been seasoned, but there's not really any incentive for them to stay in the wood. Although it will shrink, it can crack just as easily as a screw. And other than shear force preventing it from wanting to move this way, there isn't much to want to keep it in so that it doesn't back off. Probably what would happen is it will back off a little bit as it dries, and you'll lose some depth. And I wouldn't count on a nail to keep 2 pieces of wood together in this orientation. If you were to toenail, on the other hand, that probably would be okay. You can rely on shear strength with nails in wet wood, but I wouldn't rely on it for tension. The other thing about wet wood is that wood will not really shrink very much end to end, which is one of the nice things about conventional framing, because if you look at the position between these two, this isn't going to move much this way, and this isn't going to move much this way. Now what that means is that it's going to mostly move in this direction and in this direction. So there could definitely be some shrinking, maybe a ½ inch or so. Most likely after this shrinks up in a few months, I'll want to tighten down the fasteners a little bit one more time. Definitely the weakest spot is going to be this type of grain here, because there isn't much holding it together. So as this shrinks, especially now that I put fasteners through it, there's a strong possibility of cracking. That's not entirely vital for this application, so it's not a big deal. I will be bolting this down into the floor at some point. For the moment, I just wanted to get this up. I can use it as is. Most of the force is going to be directed downward at that point, and I'll also use this as an anvil, and the force will be directed downward over here. This extra space here is just for maneuvering for the most part, and I may put another appliance right here, and if I do, I may add another structural piece right there. I recessed all of these lag screws so that they wouldn't catch on anything or get in the way from mounting. Also because they weren't particularly long, some of them, so I wanted to make sure that they went through into the other boards. Here's a tip when you're driving your lag screws. Always pre-drill. If you're going to recess, drill that first with a Forstner bit. That way it leaves a center point, and then you can use a smaller bit for drilling down the center where the shaft will go. And then if you're using an impact drive or something else like that, only put in the thread portions if you're going to do a number of them all at the same time. That way you're not stressing it out. The thing that humans are worst at is the repetitive motion of cranking these in. And the thing that the impact driver is worst at is getting the shaft down after you've already gone through the threaded portion, which is smaller diameter. So let the impact driver do the work of pushing the threads through, and then crank it down the last bit with the ratchet, because I find that's where it heats up the most with the impact driver. I was able to, without waiting for any of it cooling, to put in 24 lag screws all at once by just putting in the thread portion and then ratcheting the rest down, which didn't take very long. There's a simple way where I wouldn't have to drive this into the cement as an anchor to prevent this. I could of course double the bench space, or I could potentially add a perpendicular wing to it and perhaps a third appliance or something along those lines. And I may do that just because I really like the idea of not mounting things into the floor so that I can move them around later on easily. To prevent marring on the floor surface, I put some large felt pads on the bottom. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.